The death toll from the Kentucky tornado has now climbed to over 80, including a number of children. To discuss this in more detail is American correspondent Lisa Daftari, joining once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, so many regions in and around the Mayfield, Kentucky area have been devastated, and the death toll may climb even further.
Yes, the governor is saying that they're expecting the death toll to go over 100, maybe even today. A lot of people not accounted for. As you said, it's already over 80. The National Guard has been called in. They are going home to home, checking to see if there are any survivors or any remains. It's awful. It's awful. You know, these are the national, I'm sorry, the natural devastations that show no compassion. And you know, they are right there in the eye of it. It's hitting multiple states, as it usually does this time of year. You know, this area is very prone to tornadoes and such, but Kentucky being the center and where we're seeing the majority of the devastation. The governor there has called for federal help. Joe Biden, very late last night, approved the aid package to go to Kentucky, and we're hoping for the best here.
Absolutely, keep those families in prayer. Now, Lisa, there is speculation that former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence may be taking a shot at the Republican nomination and then a potential 2024 presidential run. Tell me more.
Yes, it looks like Mike Pence is hitting the road, and he made a stop in New Hampshire. And as you know, New Hampshire being politics central, right? If you want to get a good chance at this, or get an early start, I should say, you start in New Hampshire. Speculation, only speculation, that he is interested. He's meeting with a lot of people. He's hitting up a lot of different cities, and obviously the critics are saying, you know, he can't get away from the Trump presidency, January 6th. You know, not standing behind those who came in. So he's going to have trouble from both sides. Obviously, not getting the independent centrist voters because of his ties with the Trump administration, and on the other hand, from the GOP, getting criticism for not standing behind Donald Trump during the January 6th situation. So we'll see. I mean, he obviously has a large following. He also has, you know, experience, and I think that goes a long way. So we shall see. We'll see how Donald Trump feels about this. We don't know what his reaction will be if Mike Pence does indeed throw his name into the ring here.
So, Lisa, what about Donald Trump himself? Has he put his name forward?
Yeah, that's the big question here, right? Will Donald Trump be the king or the kingmaker? Would he stand behind someone like a Mike Pence or Ron DeSantis, for example, from Florida, which many people are hoping will run? He's a very popular GOP frontrunner, right? No one has formally announced a run, but Donald Trump has hinted towards wanting to run in 2024, and obviously he has such a large following, as you know, Hal. He's probably the most popular political and I should say non-political figure we've had here in the United States. He still can get, you know, thousands and thousands to a rally. So he definitely has the popularity. He also has the stigma. The media surely won't allow this and will do whatever they can to stand in the way. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But it should be interesting going up to 2024. I should add that today the Boston Herald reported that should Joe Biden run again, his approval rating for a rerun would be about 20%, and Kamala Harris at 12%. So it's looking good for any GOP contender to get in there. But interesting times in the United States, I'll say that much.
You know, Lisa, many Canadians are quite upset at how Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has handled the COVID-19 pandemic and our economy. Well, close to 70% of Americans say they didn't like the way U.S. President Joe Biden has handled inflation, and his approval rating appears to be plummeting, as we were discussing a little bit earlier. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, you know, I don't know where they got 70% from, because I don't know who the 30% are who enjoy paying $6 at the pump, or enjoy paying 20 to 30% more for basic groceries, or enjoy, you know, not being able to take a Christmas or New Year's trip this year because of the cost of travel and the cost of again, food and gas and basic goods. Look, nobody's happy with what's going on in the United States. And what this administration tries to do is they chalk everything up to the pandemic. Here in Los Angeles, in New York, in Chicago, we have a major crime problem. I'm talking about wonderful, affluent areas. You cannot go out in broad daylight with a handbag, with a nice watch, with a nice car. People are getting mugged at parks and at schools and outside restaurants in broad daylight. And again, when the administration is pressed about this, they will blame it on the pandemic. You talk about the inflation, they blame it on the pandemic. We talk about the supply issue we have with these cartons of goods sitting at our ports, and they blame it again on the pandemic. So I think the Americans are waking up to this. The voters are waking up to this, and they're thinking it can't all be because of the pandemic. This is being mishandled, and the governors in these democratic states are abusing the system, and they're abusing the emergency laws, and they're abusing the mandates. And I think a lot of people, regardless of their political party, are becoming cognizant of what's going on. And I think it will show up in the midterms, certainly, and maybe in 2024 for the presidential.
U.S. President Joe Biden is meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin amid tensions over a Russian troop buildup near Ukraine.
Yeah, this is an interesting story, Hal. So President Biden has, they had a Zoom call with Putin, and they expressed the U.S. dissatisfaction with the Russians building up their assets on the Ukrainian border. And what they've done is that they've scheduled a future call. And in the meantime, the Russians are continuing to beef up their assets, and Ukraine's like, wait a minute, they're playing out the clock here, and they're continuing to fortify their presence here on the border. Look, we have the global community has spoken out about this. We know exactly what the Russians are up to, and we know that they will try to carry out whatever aggression they want to under the Biden presidency, because it seems like it's a free for all, and that there is no real consequence or penalty or even any firm words that are being shared by the U.S. president. They keep scheduling these calls. If you look at the foreign policy by Democrat administrations, particularly Biden and Obama, and this being a continuation perhaps of the Obama foreign policy, is to talk about diplomacy. And we schedule talks, and we schedule talks, and look at what's happening at the Iran nuclear table. You can talk about the talks that are being scheduled with Putin. Where is it getting us? The same thing can go for the Chinese and the North Koreans. So our adversaries are laughing at us. They know that this is not a firm or serious foreign policy, U.S. president. So therefore, they will play out the clock, and they will do what they want. They will carry out what they want under this presidency for sure.
Now, foreign ministers of the G7 group have warned Russia as well of massive consequences, maybe economic consequences as well, if it invades Ukraine, and urged it to de-escalate its military buildup on the border.
Yeah, that's the saving grace here. The G7, the largest economies in the global economy, in the global community, have met, and they obviously, one of the main things on their agenda is to really convey this message to Russia, to say, we will carry out sanctions. We will, there will be a penalty for your actions if you want to continue what you're doing against Ukraine. But it seems like, Russia plays this game of chess very well. They have all their pieces in the right places. And it seems like they're not deterred by any threats made by the G7. It looks like, it's gone on long enough. And perhaps the G7 is coming to the game a bit late to carry out any real threats that will carry weight with Putin. And we'll see, maybe they know ways to find loopholes around these economic sanctions, and they certainly do. We know that. And therefore, they're not taking these threats too seriously. But we know that they have these assets. We've heard from the Ukrainians that there are over 150,000 troops amassed at the Ukrainian border. And that's not a joke. It's not going to be a joke to remove them. And it seems like day by day, they're looking to fortify those assets and not remove them anyway.
Lisa, recent satellite images show that Iran appears to be preparing for a launch as negotiations continue in Austria over its tattered nuclear deal with world powers. Tell me more.
Yeah, speaking of flexing muscles against the United States administration, look at the optics here, Hal. The Iranian regime wants a deal. Obviously, they want the sanctions removed, and they want to be part of the global community with regards to trade and with regards to opening up their banking system and getting the sanctions removed and all of that. But at the same time, while they're at the negotiation table, they don't feel any need to at least show give the appearance of, playing along or being on their best behavior. Back at home, we have satellite images that they are not only planning a launch, that they have certainly beefed up their enrichment of uranium. They have they have not backed off at all. The IAEA complains about a lack of transparency with regards to their weapons program. And here they are at the table making more demands and fewer compromises to move this plan along. Again, they know how badly the US, the West, wants this deal, and they are doing exactly, they're playing their hand as they should. They believe they're the ones who have the leverage. We talk about getting back into a 2015 Iran nuclear deal. That was the deal that was struck, the JCPOA, that was struck between the five world powers and the United States under President Obama. The difference being is back then the Iranians had one of these wolves in sheep clothing type of president, Rouhani, who pretended at least to be on his best behavior, and gave the visual of, we are playing along, we want that handshake, and we're going to do what we can to get that handshake. And they did, and they got billions of dollars of cash, along with the normalization of relations for a few years. President Trump, of course, ripped up that deal, and President Biden, when he campaigned with Kamala Harris, said, we're going to get right back into that deal. Now, we have seen no compromises. We have seen nothing from the Iranian regime, more chest thumping, more demands. And again, they will get back into to the negotiating table with the United States and world powers, because they know how badly the West wants this deal. It's a very, very bad formula and strategy to follow. And of course, again, I'll connect the dots one more time. This is what we're seeing throughout the world. We're seeing our adversaries playing out the clock. They're flexing their muscles, and they know that they can get away with whatever they want under a lack of U.S. leadership.
Now, still with Iran, it is preparing to launch a new ship for its Navy. The ship is called Shiraz, and it's supposed to be an intelligence gathering ship that will also be equipped with a helicopter and radar. Why should we be concerned about that?
Yeah, this is very concerning because as we've been following with multiple news stories about Iran seizing ships, this maritime strategy has been something that the Iranian regime has been following for quite a while. If you look at the last 40 years of the Iranian regime, since they came into power after the toppling of the Shah, this regime has done masterfully at spreading their influence globally. And they have done so through proxy terrorist groups in various nations. They have exported terrorism through suicide bombers in various places. They have given their influence in places like China and the African continent and Latin America by setting up schools and soup kitchens and obviously giving them internet and infrastructure in exchange for influence and terror organizations on the ground. And here we have them obviously expanding their influence in the seas. And this continues with that story. And again, if we don't connect the dots, we don't see what Iran's doing. This doesn't look like such a malign, situation with the Iranians just, expanding their capabilities in the sea. It goes to a larger story, a larger strategy, and one that the West should certainly keep an eye out for, because it increases their influence, not just in their own surrounding area, but globally. And they know that. And that's exactly, their eyes are on the prize. And that's exactly what we should watch out for. When we're at the negotiating table, I know that the US has not called for other things like human rights abuses, like the import and export of terror by the Iranian regime, and of course, their expansion of their influence in the region. So this story definitely points to that.
Lisa, Uzbekistan is urging neighboring countries to keep helping Afghanistan. The country's foreign minister says the aid is needed to really help prevent a humanitarian crisis in the Taliban-led nation.
Yeah, it looks like it's a little too late for a humanitarian crisis. We're already looking at one, but Uzbekistan's point is the same as what Pakistan and all the other neighboring nations are saying. Please help them so we don't have to help them, is what they're really saying. Obviously, there are a lot of refugees. They're running out of the country, and and for the right reasons. Obviously, the country is war torn. It's led by the Taliban. Women can't go to school. They can't have their jobs. There are people being shot on the street for no good reason. Journalists are being rounded up. Teachers are being rounded up, and the list goes on. The Taliban promised us a new face and better behavior, but we didn't get any of that. And now, to add to that, winter is coming. So you obviously see the humanitarian crisis increasing. Obviously, there is a shortage of electricity, heat, obviously food items, and people living on the streets. So that all gets exacerbated with the winter months, and we're hoping that the right aid gets into the right hands. Not just that we give aid, but a few months ago, I remember the administration here in Washington saying that we will give aid to the Taliban to disperse. That's not the right move. The Taliban will take advantage of that aid. They will use it for themselves. It will not get into the right hands. But perhaps we can find real partners on the ground over there, if they're still there, to help us hand out the aid and to help people in need. It's truly horrific. And I hope that we don't take our eyes off this story anytime soon, because it's a continuing crisis.
Do we know if the Taliban is allowing groups like Open Doors and the Red Cross to make its way in to help some of the people of Afghanistan?
It's interesting. So on a formal level, no. And I've heard a lot of these groups are having trouble, whether they wanted to get out of the country or they're having trouble connecting on the ground. If they're having trouble operating on a formal level, and an informal level, I know a lot of people are doing, God's work on the ground there. They have, they're there, they're helping, they're able to connect with the outside and get help to the people on the ground there. I have a few friends that I'm in touch with that are really doing wonderful work on the ground over there. But again, it's not so much in a formal capacity, but they have to stay under the radar and work around the system there. Oh, and another thing I wanted to add, Hal, is that a lot of the aid workers are women, and this is a very interesting story, that the aid is trickling into the population because these women cannot go deliver the aid by themselves, and in many cases their fathers or their husbands can't go with them because they have their own jobs. So now they have to hire new aid workers who are either men, or wait for these women to find male escorts or family members to help them deliver the aid. So that's another issue. But again, it's laughable. It's criable, I should say, because it's such a horrific time, and they're still giving these women a hard time about going out and delivering aid.
Wow. The more aid, the better, the more help. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.